a blue, hard Montana winter, a rancher gives his son 7 days to marry for power. Then salt turns up in the hay. A stable girl drags a boy across talking ice, and the son lays different proof on his father's desk. An army memo, a relay deal, and the woman who keeps the ranch alive. The cold had teeth that winter. It chewed the hides off cattle and skimmed ice over every stock tank on Northern Star Ranch. Wind came down from the Absarokas like a whetstone, wringing the wire and sanding the world clean. Hooves rang on crusted snow. Leather squeaked. The air smelled of iron, wood smoke, and old tallow. Caleb Hart rode the last mile in, with his scarf frozen to his breath. Out past the cottonwoods he'd seen the cows bunching against the drifts, noses bloody from trying to punch through ice to the grass. Love this tale? Hit like, share, and subscribe to keep the West wild. Winter forage had crusted hard. A bad sign this early. The house threw a square of lamplight over snow. Inside, the study storms snapped and ticked. Ledgers lay open like wounds. Silas Hart stood over the map table with his spectacles low and his jaw set. He was 60 if a day, built like a post oak and hard in the same useful way. "Shut the door," he said. Caleb shut it and held his hands to the stove. The heat bit as fierce as the cold. Wax and ink and pipe smoke lived in that room. On the wall hung a sharps and a photograph of a woman with steady eyes. Silas tapped the menine while the map with a knuckle. 7 days. For what? To choose a wife. He didn't blink. Families are coming in once the trail's broken. Mercer, Penfield, Whitcomb, Thorne, Cutter, each brings something we need. Bank, water, freight, Washington, pull. You'll pick one by week's end. Caleb felt the wind still howling in his ears. We've got cows drifting and yearlings losing weight. We need hay, not a parlor full of silk. We need both, Silas said, and we'll have both if you do your part. Caleb rubbed thawing fingers against his palms. The skin burned. I won't hitch myself like a team horse to somebody else's politics. Silas leaned, palms flat on the map. The gold of the lamp caught the scars on his knuckles. You think this place holds because you're sweet on the horses and good with a rope? Son, land don't care how you feel. Bankers don't either, winter least of all. Winter I can fight, Caleb said. Feed, shelter, Miles. Feelings you can't afford. Silas's voice stayed low. Your granddad came with a yoke of oxen and a broken mule. I laid fence to the horizon. What you do is make sure the Hart name don't get ground under the same ice you saw in those pastures. Alliances keep a ranch standing when weather and prices don't. Caleb stared at the map. Blue pencil marked the creek frozen solid. Red pencil's line showed the windbreaks he'd built last fall. He'd been proud of those until the wind blew higher and laughed at men's plans. 7 days, Silas said again. We'll host proper. You'll ride with each girl, speak decent, and decide. If you can't manage a choice, you can manage a bedroll. There's always open country for a man with no obligations. You'd cut me loose over this? I'd cut off a black hoof to save a sound horse. Silas straightened. The stove popped as if to end the matter. He removed his spectacles and cleaned them with the square of linen, eyes never leaving his boy. I won't bury this place beside your mother. Her picture watched them both. Caleb felt the old ache stir, a raw place the cold never quite reached. He swallowed it down. The cows are crusting out, he said. We need to open lanes to the south wind and pull the weak ones to the cottonwood draw. Zeb's on it, Silas said. He's worth 3 men, and you make 4 when you're not arguing. Caleb nodded. His mouth tasted of iron and coffee. What about Nora Pike? Silas's eyes clipped to him. She's a hand, a good one. She stays a hand. He slid the spectacles back on. "Don't be foolish." Caleb said nothing. There were words that came easy and did no good, and there were the others that cost a man. He took the cost and kept his mouth. Outside, the wind pushed at him like a big, rough brother. Stars were knife points. He crossed the yard with his collar up and his jaw set, boots squealing on the hard pack, and headed for the long barn. Light leaked between the boards. Horses blew steam and bumped at their mangers. The place had its own weather, warm breath, sweet hay, the faithful rub of leather on wood. Zeb Rollins looked up from a saddle he was oiling. Gray beard, eyes merry when the world allowed. "He give you the sermon?" "He set the clock," Caleb said. "Figures." Zeb tested a stirrup with a thumb. "Storm's coming mean. Cows'll drift if we don't string 'em to feed. Got your hands?" "Most of 'em. We'll cut lanes at first light." Zeb grunted. "Good, and Caleb?" "What?" "Whatever else Silas said. Keep your head out where it can see weather coming. Pride makes a poor snow shovel." Caleb almost smiled. "You sound like the good book." "I am the good book," Zeb said, and the saddle creaked under his palm. "Now go sleep. You'll need legs." Caleb walked the row, palming warm necks, listening to the quiet talk of horses. Somewhere toward the back he heard soft humming, low and sure as a mare's nicker. He stood there a moment with the cold still burning and in his lungs and the 7-day clock ticking inside his chest, and he let the barn's heat soak to the bone. Outside, the wind climbed the rafters. The ranch breathed and braced. Winter was here, and everything that mattered would now have to hold. Before daylight had a color, the long barn was awake. Steam rolled off warm backs. A lantern threw a gold circle over straw, and in that circle, Nora Pike worked like someone who'd never learned to waste a sun. Motion. She had a kettle of water set by the brazier and a pan of mash cooling on the grain box, bran, salt, a little molasses she'd coaxed from Mrs. Holcomb for doctorin'. The smell of camphor rode above the sweet, along with sheep tallow and horse breath. A frostbitten gelding, Blue Jack, shifted his weight and blew through his nose, eyes watching her hands. "Hush now," she said, voice low, steady. "I know it burns. Burnin' means life's still in it." She wrapped his pastern in warm cloth, then worked liniment into a stiff cannon bone, thumb sure, not cruel. Blue Jack sighed the way a man does when the pain turns from knife to dull stone. Caleb stood in the passage and let the scene take hold of him, the square of lantern, the shine on leather, the careful set of Nora's shoulders under her faded wool. The week in his head ticked loud, but the barn had its own clock, older and honest. "You ought to be asleep," he said. She didn't look up. "You, too. Zeb wants lanes cut at first light. Chinook's not comin' soon enough." "Zeb's right most days," she said, changing the wrap. "When he ain't, the weather argues him into it." Caleb stepped closer. Straw broke under his heel, dry as paper. "Silas set a 7-day clock," he said, though she had to know. Word traveled between stalls faster than it ever did down a hallway. "I figured," she said. "Room's getting sheeted in the big house. Mrs. Holcomb has the silver out. I was told to leave my apron at the door if I walked through." The corner of her mouth tugged. Not quite a smile. "Don't worry, I used the back steps." He felt the heat in his face, though the barn was warm enough to soften rope. "Nora, no," she said, thinly, looking at him, brown eyes, steady as a good mare. "Don't make more work for me than I already got." "What kind of talk is that?" "The true kind." She lifted Blue Jack's hoof, laid it careful on the block, and rasped a split edge that cold had raised. The scrape set little sparks of sound dancing. "You're a heart, I'm a hand. You start standing in doorways, staring at me while the house lays out napkins and names, and folks'll talk till spring runoff. Talk don't feed a calf." He swallowed the sting of it. "I don't give a damn what talk feeds." "You better," she said. soft as a blanket thrown over a shivering thing. This place eats rumor same as hay when the stacks get low. Keep the ranch's honor first, Mr. Hart. That's your job. He leaned his knuckles into a post. And what's yours? She set the rasp aside, warm rubbed the leg again. Horses. Then whatever else needs doing. Same as always. The lantern ticked as the heat climbed its globe. Blue Jack shifted and put more weight on the mended foot. Trust, measured in ounces. Nora heard it and nodded like they'd struck a bargain. There's a boy, she said without looking at Caleb. Toby, you seen him. Sleeps in the tack room when the stove's full. He's got a cough won't shake. If the wind cuts today like last night, he stays to oil headstalls. You tell Zeb I said so. You tell him, Caleb said. He listens when you talk. I work for Zeb, she said. You carry Silas say. There's a difference. He tried to laugh and didn't find it. Silas says I pick a wife in a week or go leading a bedroll south. Then pick one, Nora said, and there was no hurt in her voice, only clean, level ground. Pick one that keeps the bank quiet, the water open, and your father from dying on his feet, trying to hold up this sky alone. What do you pick? She raised her eyes again. A fleck of camphor shone on her knuckle. I pick what I've always picked, a job to do and a place to do it. I'm warm here. Barn's honest. Horses don't lie. He stepped into the lantern's circle. The light put gold on it behind his coat and showed the cold crack in his lip where last night's wind had bit him. I'm trying to find another way, he said. Find it quiet, she said. And if you can't find it, walk the way laid out and don't look over your shoulder. That'll be the kindness you can do me. He wanted to reach for her, some reflex older than thought, the same thing a man does when a skittish colt flinches, hand out, palm open. She saw the motion start and set Blue Jack's hoof down and stepped back one pace so the air had room between them. Don't, she said. And it wasn't anger, it was a guard dog lying down between two hungry things. Zeb's boots knocked the jam and brought a gust of hard air with him. Mornin' ain't waitin', he said, cheerful in the way men get when there's too much to do to think about the rest. He took in the two of them, the gelding, the lantern, his eyes softened a fraction. That leg looking to carry. Enough, Nora said. Keep him out of drifts. Cold'll take what I put back. Zeb nodded. You hear that, boss? He told Caleb. She says you're not allowed to be a fool this morning. I heard, Caleb said. Good, Zeb said. Harness on the sled. We'll pull squares to the cottonwood draw. Give the thin ones a chance. Wine's sharpening. You can feel it bite through the shirt. Love this tale? Hit like, share, and subscribe to keep the West wild. He was right. The air by the door had a glitter to it. A dry, glassy edge that made a man picture how it would feel on a wet lung. Caleb shouldered into his coat. He looked once more at Nora, at the way she stood easy with a good animal and a hard truth. I'll keep the honor first, he said, but I won't forget who told me to. You'll forget plenty once you hit that wind, she said, and finally there was a ghost of a smile, like a lamp turned down to save oil. Go on. He went. The yard hit him like a slap and then a handshake. Sled runners squealed. Harness jingled. Men called short and spared the air. The eastern line was turning from black to iron as Day thought about getting up. He felt the week sitting on him like a rider, but the work climbed into his bones and made its own sense. Behind him in the long barn, the lantern burned on. Nora would take Blue Jack a pan of mash and check Toby's blanket and lay out wraps for when they came back half frozen and hungry. She'd hum the tune she always hummed when her hands were busy and her mind was somewhere the weather couldn't quite reach. The snow was hard as old bread. The job was simple as a prayer. Move feed, move cattle, hold what you can in a land that lets go. Caleb set his shoulder to it and let the cold teach him what mattered and what didn't. The rest, he told himself, would have to wait its turn. Snow came off the high country in thin sheets. like someone shaking flour from a sack. By noon, the road from town wore 2 brown grooves and a gloss of ice. The first sleigh slid in on steel runners, bells flat in the cold. Then another, then a wagon with canvas tight as a drumhead. Northern Star's yard filled with white breath and lacquered trunks and men in hats too new for weather like this. Mrs. Holcomb had the porch swept and the lamps turned up. The big house smelled of coffee, starch, lemon oil, and something sweet she'd hidden from the hands. Rugs ate the sound off boot heels. Fire snapped in both parlors, and the piano had its lid open like a bright mouth. The good silver shone so hard you could count your worries in it. Silas stood square in the entry, jaw shaved clean, black coat broad in the shoulders. He shook hands like he was reading a brand. "Mercer, Penfield, Thorne, Cutter." His voice carried the weight of a scale beam. "Mrs. Whitcomb, Ruth." A nod softened a hair. "Welcome in out the weather." Evangeline Mercer stepped from her cloak first. Fox trim, cheekbones high, eyes that had measured rooms like this since birth. Lydia Penfield was smaller, gloved tight, the kind of smile that knew its numbers. Mabel Thorne came with a senator's posture and a traveling maid who took offense from the air. Rosalie Cutter had a laugh ready and a look that liked being seen. Ruth Whitcomb wasn't dressed to dazzle. She wore wool the color of sage and boots fit for ice. Her eyes saw the yard, the sky, the barn. Then they went to Caleb. He stood a half step behind Silas, shoulders full of the morning's work, hair still rough from his hat. He said the right words, and meant some of them. "You're kind to brave the road. Yes, the wind's mean. Yes, we'll ride when it eases." He could feel the cold on his coat turning to damp, and the damp to steam. The heat pressed on him harder than the weather had. They hung cloaks, thawed fingers. Mrs. Holcomb parceled them to guest rooms like a general placing companies. In the parlor, cups steamed and the piano found a waltz. Ladies talked Denver and Washington and what passes for culture this side of the divide. Fathers and uncles drifted toward ledgers as iron filings will to a magnet. Silas fed them beef facts and freight rates and spoke of water as if it were gold under glass. Caleb did his duty, which is a wide word and heavy. He showed the Whitcomb girl the view from the east windows, the cottonwoods black against the white, the long barn a low line. "We keep colts on that side, out of the teeth of it," he said. "You raised those windbreaks yourself." Ruth said, not a question. "With Zeb and 3 good men." "You ride in this?" she asked, watching the flakes tilt and thicken. "When there's work." She studied him one beat more than manners require. "You carry your father's shoulders," she said, almost to herself. Then her gaze slid to the barn without moving her head, just the eyes doing what eyes do. "There's good sense under that roof," she added. "You can tell by how the horses stand." He followed her look before he could stop it. Lantern glow there like a coal in drifted ash. A shadow crossed the crack between boards. He knew the shape without needing a name. Ruth's mouth tugged once like she'd heard a joke no one told. "Best keep your eyes where they won't get chapped," she said, and she did him the grace of turning the talk. "Quarter horses, is it? My brothers swear by them when the creek rises." "Short backs, good lungs," he said, grateful for stock and ground. "They don't quit easy." "Sounds like the women in this country," Ruth said, dry. The dry made it friendly, not sharp. Across the room, Evangeline Mercer was charming Silas with questions about the spur line beyond town. Lydia's father thumbed interest tables and called them progress. Mabel Thorne asked after judges and grazing permits like she was ordering bolts of cloth. Rosalie Cutter admired the chandelier and asked how often one entertains. Caleb kept his face right and his words clean. He refilled cups, he offered a tour for when the sky cleared. He placed each name with each face and kept the wind off his tone. Between notes of the waltz and the talk of rates, he caught a faint smell of horse and tallow when the kitchen door breathed. It ribboned through coffee and lemon oil and went straight to his heart like heat after frost. Mrs. Holcomb shut the swing quick, but he'd had his inch of air, and it was enough to set a man off balance. Silas's hand came down on his shoulder, weighty as a brand. "Caleb will lead a ride when the light holds," he announced. "Short loop. Enough to show you what the north side looks like in winter. You'll like our string." "Yes," Caleb said, "we'll use the broke ones." Lydia smiled at him like he was a figure in a ledger that had reconciled. "Do you enjoy opera, Mr. Hart?" she asked. "I haven't heard one," he said. "Cows don't sing much." Rosalie laughed. Mabel's brows clouded. Evangeline's eyes cooled a degree. Ruth's stayed warm. When the formalities eased, Ruth drifted near again, as women do who have learned to move through rooms without pushing. "I won't stay long," she said, voice pitched for him and the fire. "But if you ever need a witness to what a person is, not who they're kin to, I have eyes." "For what?" he asked, mournful. "For the barn," she said, and let it stand. Then, after a beat, "For you." He looked at her. That proper? She wasn't flirting. She wasn't picking a side she didn't mean. She was telling him there are folks on the plains who know the line between show and work, and which one keeps you alive when the mercury drops out of the glass. He nodded once. "Thank you, Miss Whitcomb." "Ruth," she said, "use the name you'll remember when your face stings too much to form the rest." A gust shouldered the house then, rattled the east windows in their frames. The piano stumbled and caught itself. Snow thickened to a steady fall, not angry yet, just intent. Somewhere in the yard harness rang, and a man swore soft to keep the edge off his breath. Caleb stood in a warm room at a good fire with 5 futures laid out like place cards. He could feel the week measuring him, same as his father did, same as winter did. He lifted his cup, found it empty, and set it down clean. "Ladies," he said, voice steady, "if the sky gives us a patch, we'll ride before the light dies. If it doesn't, we'll tour the barns and keep our toes." He did not look to the barn when he said it. He did not need to. The barn lived in him, same as the weather, same as the work, same as the thing he couldn't speak yet without breaking something he'd need later. Outside, the north wind pushed its hand against the land. Inside, the house smiled and made talk. Between the two stood a man with 7 days and a name to carry. By mid-afternoon, the sky had that hammered look it gets before a blow. Snow came low and fast, not fat flakes, but hard sugar that found skin and stung it. The cottonwood draw turned to a white throat. Men leaned into the sled, and the sled leaned into the horses. Every breath smoked. Caleb and Zeb worked the south fence, breaking lanes to feed, dropping squares where the drift made a wall. Wires sang under ice. The cold took what a man said and snapped it in half. "Keep 'em moving," Zeb barked, voice flat to save air. "Short pushes, let 'em think it's their idea." The cows bawled at the smell of hay, and the wind answered with its own long note. Caleb shoved a square off the sled, shoulders burning pleasant from honest work. For a minute it felt clean and simple, then a shape moved in the white that wasn't cattle. Nora. She rode out of the yard on the rabbit-gray, scarf-tight, hat tied down. She had a bundle under one arm and her jaw set the way folks set a wedge before swinging. Caleb stepped off the sled. "What are you doing out?" "Counting heads," she said, "and I'm short when I care about. Toby's bunk's cold." "Barn work keeps him in," Caleb said. "He didn't stay," Nora answered, done. "Figure he went to see to the south gate. He frets that latch." She handed Zeb the bundle. "Dry mitts and hot stones, Mrs. Holcomb's orders." Zeb grunted. Bless that woman. Nora swung down, eyes scanning the white. Wayne's gone quartering. If the boy walked with it, he'll end up in the cut below Whitcomb's line. She pulled a strip of red wool from her pocket and tied it on the top wire of the corner post. Not neat and fast. We leave you a breadcrumb, she told the land, like it could hear. Caleb caught her bridle. I'll go. You keep the barn. You keep the herd off the cut, she said. If they drift in there, you'll be picking them out with a shovel. I know how Toby thinks. I'll take Zeb. Two's enough to find one boy. Zeb was already tightening his cinch. She's right, boss. Boy favors south fence when he's scared. Come on, Pike. Keep your rope high. They rode into the white like men walk into their own smoke. Caleb watched them vanish and felt the old sick weight tug his gut. A boy out in this, a hand he trusted headed after him, and the wind moving the world around like furniture. He put his shoulder to the job. Squares fell, cows lined out, heads down, tails to the blow. He set a lane with the sled toward the draw where there was a little windbreak. Kept the thin ones pointed to shelter. He glanced once at the red scrap on the wire. It held bright as blood in all that empty. Whiteout eats distance. Past 100 yards, everything was rumor. Zeb's voice found Nora's ear by rope and habit. You lay marks? He asked, eyes squinting against the sting. Every third post, she said, tying another strip. Wind jumps. I want bread both ways. They followed the fence like it was scripture. The wire hummed under rhyme. Hooves rang sharp. Once the gray stumbled in a drift, and Nora let him find his feet, weight forward, patient as she was with a bad-tempered mare on the first day of saddle. There, Zeb said, a lump under a curl of snow that moved wrong. They slid down, knees in to keep feeling. Toby's cap had a white crust. His lips were slate. He'd curled himself around a yearling heifer stuck belly deep, hands on her nose to keep her from sucking ice. Fool boy, Zeb breathed, and it held more love than anger. You trying to freeze for charity? Toby blinked slow. Gate was open, he whispered. Didn't want her to break a leg. Tried to... couldn't get her. Sorry, Miss Nora. Hush, Nora said, already moving. You did fine. She looped her rope around the heifer's girth, ran the tail to her saddle horn, and set the gray low. Easy, she told him. Lean into it. Don't ask more than you can keep. The gray leaned. The rope sang. Ice broke with a bark. The heifer lurched and came free, legs flailing for bottom. Zeb dragged Toby up against him and jammed hot stones in the boy's armpits, wrapped a spare scarf twice, thumped his back once like he could jar life loose. Breathe, kid, he ordered. Pusha. You owe me boot shinin' till spring for this. Toby tried a smile and managed a cough. Nora turned the gray and set the heifer on her tail, ponying her by feel more than sight. She tied another red strip at the next post without breaking rhythm. The marks made a red ladder in the white, rung to rung. Love this tale? Hit like, share, and subscribe to keep the West wild. Stay on the wire, she called to Zeb. If I lose the fence, I'll lose the world. Fence won't leave you, he said. It's married to this country. They walked the cattle pace home, slow enough to keep breath, steady enough to stay warm. Twice the wind tried to turn them. Twice the red flutter on wire argued them back. By the time the yard's line showed, Nora's lashes were white, and the hair by her scarf had turned to glass. The gray blew like a forge. Toby was shivering now, which was good news. Shivering meant the worst hadn't got him yet. Men came out of the fog of the barn with blankets and curses soft as prayers. Mrs. Holcomb had kettles rolling and a bed by the stove. They peeled Toby like a potato without shame or ceremony, rubbed him to red, poured him brose, cussed him warm. The yearling found a corner with hay and lay down, chewing like nothing had happened in the world. Caleb shouldered in, face scored by cold, eyes searching. He saw Toby's color, then found Nora. She was unwinding her rope with stiff fingers, blowing on the horn to melt the ring of ice around it. "You were right," he said. The words felt big in his mouth. "About the boy, about the cut." "That'd be a first for me today," she said, voice tired. "I told him to stay in. I'll tell him again when his ears thaw enough to hear it." "You left marks," he said, nodding toward the red on the fence through the open door. "Wind don't love straight lines," she said. "You give yourself away to argue back." He reached for her hands before he thought. Her knuckles were cracked and shiny with cold. Camphor in the cracks. He chafed them between his palms. Not gentle, not rough, just enough to bring them back. She let him a beat longer than the rule said, then took them back and tucked them under her arms. "Don't," she said, same as before, but the edge had gone out of it. "You got cows askin' after you." "And you?" "I got a barn," she said, and her mouth tugged. "It keeps." Zeb stuck his head in from Toby's side of the stove. "Boy's going to live to get a whoopin'," he said, "which is a mercy for him and a pleasure for me." Caleb looked at the door. The red scarf on the corner post cut the white like a brand. In the big house, somewhere behind heavy walls and good carpets, guests warmed their hands over coffee, and the piano talked of Vienna. Out here, the ranch kept its own time. "Thank you," he said. Nora tipped her chin like she'd heard thanks from folks who meant it and folks who didn't, and knew where to put each one. "Go on," she said. "Wine's shifting. When it does that, the drift thinks about walking." He went. The yard took him again, full in the face. Behind him, in the warm place where horses breathe and people come back to life, a woman hung up a rope with steady hands and saved the red scarf for another storm. The storm quit like a door falling shut. Morning came hard and blue, the kind of cold that makes wood ring and nails squeal in their holes. Breath smoked straight up, no wind to lean on. Caleb put coffee in him, salt pork, a slab of yesterday's bread, then saddled Copper and told Zeb he was riding to town on errands. "Errands smell like plantains," Zeb said, eyeing the sky. "You got rope enough for those?" "I'll borrow some if I run short." "Take the creek bed till the bridge," Zeb said. "Road's glass, and keep it quiet. Pride's got long ears in winter." Caleb nodded. He found Nora by the stove with Toby, who sat in a blanket cocoon, color back in his cheeks, and a stubborn look that meant he'd learned little and lived through it anyway. The red scarf hung to dry on a peg, brighter than anything else in the room. "You keep to oilin' today," Caleb told the boy. "If I see your boot prints past the yard, I'll fit 'em with kindling." "Yes, sir," Toby said, voice raw but wanting to please. Nora poured a tin of broth and handed it over. Steam ghosted between them. "Road'll bite," she said, without looking up. "I'll bite back," he said. "Good," she said. "Bring all your teeth home." Copper's shoes hissed on the creek ice, then found sand where the water kept a ragged lane open. Town was 8 miles of white and shine. Boards boomed under hoof when he crossed the bridge. Cold Springs had a church, 2 stores, a saloon with a door that hung crooked even in good weather, and a telegraph window that clicked like a parlor full of crickets. Inside, coal smoke sat with a man the shape of a barrel and a visor pulled low. "Message?" the operator asked. "2," Caleb said, sliding coins. "To the quartermaster, Fort Custer. Attention Captain Harlan. Northern Star Ranch proposes remount stock, request terms and inspection. And to Rocky Mountain Post and Telegraph in Billings, Northern Star can host winter relay, feed, shed, hot room, request lease terms and schedule." The keys chattered. The wire took his hope, like it takes everything, without comment. He let Copper steam at the rail and stamped blood back into his toes, till the operator rapped the glass and waved 2 slips like flags. "Captain Harlan's in town," the man said, surprised at his own news. "Put up at the Carver house. Says he'll meet you in the lobby in half an hour." "And the other?" "Billings says their man's here too. Pritchard. Traveling to sight the winter line. Must be God's day for errands." Caleb took both papers and felt something ease under his ribs that hadn't eased in weeks. The Carver house tried to smell like lemon and velvet and didn't quite beat the coal. A pot-bellied stove thumped in the lobby. Captain Ezra Harlan stood at the window in a crisp coat, the Army's eagle glinting at his collar like a fresh coin, his eyes measured as if he were making a requisition. "You Hart?" he asked. "Yes, sir." "Here. You've got horses," Harlan said. "Everyone with a fence says the same." "We have the kind you can throw a pack on and not apologize," Caleb said. "Short backs. Good feet. Winters make 'em honest." Harlan's mouth twitched. "You're proposing what?" 60 head per batch, Caleb said, numbers steady on his tongue now that they were loose. 4 batches in 2 years, gentle broke, sound, will deliver to the railhead or to your remount sergeant's yard. Buyer's choice. We'll hold replacements if anything washes out inside 30 days. Harlan's eyebrows tipped up a hair. "Price?" "Fair," Caleb said. He wasn't ready to hang a number where anyone could shoot at it yet. "You'll get it when you see the string." "I'll want teeth looked at, wind tested, and hocks clean," Harlan said. "I'd also want proof this is a ranch that won't vanish at the first dry summer." Caleb felt Silas's shadow step in behind him and straighten his back. "Northern Star isn't a tent and a wish," he said. "It's fence and water and men who'll show up after dark. You like paperwork? I can show brands registered, taxes paid, winter feed stacked." "Paper calms the men above me," Harlan said, "but I trust what I can throw a saddle on more than what I can stamp." He looked at Caleb a long second. "You show me 60 in the flesh when the trail opens. I'll write a memorandum now, subject to inspection, so your banker stops chewing his pencil." "Put subject to inspection big," Caleb said. "I'm not afraid of ink." Harlan smiled with his mouth, not his eyes. "You'd be surprised how many men are." He pulled a form from his valise, the Army kind, neat boxes and tidy lines. "We'll call this an intent. You fail me and I fail you. Nobody gets dragged in front of a board." The pen bit paper, names went down, dates, too. Caleb ran a finger over his own last name once, like a man testing a rope. It held. "Thank you," he said. "Don't thank me," Harlan said. "Bring me horses. We're sending troopers west on roads that don't deserve the name. I'd rather they sat something bred for country than some long-necked parade mistake." "Then we're your people," Caleb said. "See you in spring," Harlan said, and shook his hand like he meant it. Pritchard from the Post and Telegraph had a coat too thin for the day, and hands ink-stained to the knuckle. He drank his coffee like it was a task to finish. "You can keep a room warm in that big barn of yours?" he asked without hello. "We can make a stove roar and a bunk not kill a man overnight," Caleb said. "We need a winter relay between Cold Springs and Cut Bank," Pritchard said. "Team change, wire splice, 2 cots for night runners. We'll pay rent by the month, coal by the ton, and throw in 2 teams stabled on your hay. You keep them shod and ready. Our boys don't complain much, but they bleed like anyone. They need a place that isn't a snowbank." "How long a lease?" Caleb asked. "First snow to last," Pritchard said. "Call it 5 months on paper, 6 in truth. We're late already." "Space is easy," Caleb said. "We can partition the north end, run a line through the wall so your key sits where a man can hear the stock breathe. Sled can come right to the door." Pritchard looked at him for the first time like he might be useful for something beyond a signature. "You think like a runner. That's encouraging. Draw me a simple map. Yard, approach where you'd want a pole. I'll put it with the agreement. We can wire Billings today, and I'll scratch a memorandum same as the army man did for you." Caleb kept his face flat, same way he did when a green horse decided to test what kind of rider he had. Inside, he felt the balance shift a notch. "We'll need it in writing," he said. "Mrs. Holcomb insists." He smiled. Pritchard didn't. By noon, he had 2 papers in his inside pocket, where the cold couldn't chew them. He ate a plate of beans and bacon by the window, watching townsfolk move the way winter makes them. Quick, head down, no wasted steps. On the street, a sleigh went by with a city girl under a fir and a blush the air couldn't take. He'd be expected to sit near her later and say soft things while the piano remembered places it had never seen. He didn't have room for soft, not with ink still drying. He rode home by the creek again, copper sure-footed and eager for the barn's warm breath. Cloud came up slow over the range, gray felt laid over blue. Silas was in the yard when he swung down, coat collar up, hat low. He looked like the same man who'd built fence to the horizon and dared the land to outlast him. "I'll treat you fair?" he asked, casual in a way that never fooled anyone. "Fair enough," Caleb said. The papers felt hot where they rode. Silas studied his boy's face the way he studied a gate latch before a blow. "Ride at 3, he said. "Ladies want to see our pretty ponies. Make sure none of 'em land in the drifts. Dinner at 6. Talk like a man who sleeps on linen." "Yes, sir." Silas turned to go, then paused the half-second he gives things he can't fix with a hammer. "That boy?" "Warm," Caleb said, alive enough to get bored again. Silas grunted, which in his tongue meant good. He went on toward the house, leaving boot marks clean on the hard pack. In the barn, Nora was checking a strap, palm moving down leather as if she could teach it manners by touch. The red scarf hung neat now, dry and ready. Caleb drew the army memo out and the relay note after it and let her see them without showing them to anyone else. She read quick and careful. No gasp, no clap of hands, just a longer breath. 4 batches, she said, 60 a time. "If we stand them upright," he said, "if Silas doesn't throw me from the porch," for going around him. "Silas likes numbers," she said. "He doesn't like how they get born. You'll have to bring him these like they fell out of the sky." Love this tale? Hit like, share, and subscribe to keep the West wild. Think he'll bless it? Bless. She almost laughed. He'll count it, then he'll decide if counting is enough. She handed the papers back, not touching his fingers. "Keep those dry. Wind loves to read men's plans." He slid them deep inside his coat. The day had a new weight, not just the week set by his father, but a different one, the kind a man chooses to carry because it might lead to daylight. "Ride at 3, he said. "I heard," she said. "I've put the broke ones by the gate. Don't let the silk sleeves saw at their mouths." He almost said something useless and kind. Instead he nodded, because sometimes that's the one true thing a man has. Outside, the sky darkened a shade. In the house, a piano cleared its throat. In his coat, ink dried. The ranch, which had lived too long on pride and weather, had the start of a different kind of feed laid up, paper that might turn back a hard winter and a harder father. It wasn't enough yet. Nothing is until it holds under use. But for the first time, the numbers in Caleb's head made a sound like hope. Afternoon light went thin as tin. The wind had laid down, but the cold hung in the yard like a bell note. Caleb put the ladies up on the broke string and kept the loop small along the shelter of the cottonwoods. Ruth Whitcomb sat a bay like she'd been born to it. The others rode proper and careful, silk gloves tight on reins. He talked bloodlines and feed and did not say out loud that the world could turn on a bad flake of hay. Back at the house, laughter and piano rolled when the ride ended. Ruth lingered a breath on the porch, eyes on the hay yard where the big stacks wore snow caps like old men. "One of your hands working that late?" she asked. Caleb followed her look. A figure moved along the downwind face, quick and close to the bales. "No order for it," he said. "Zeb locks that gate." "Then someone's doing a thing he wasn't told." Ruth's voice stayed easy. "I'll go warm my fingers and pretend I didn't see just yet." He stepped off the porch into the blue cold. Frost popped in the boards. The gate chain had been slid back and rehung to look right from 5 feet. A neat lie. Caleb's gun went hard. He found Nora in the long barn, pulling the last of the tack. "Cows turn their noses to the last feed," she said. "Not all, but enough to itch me wrong." "Somebody's in the stacks," he said. She didn't waste a word. She took a hook and a lantern, tied a scarf tight, and followed him out. The snow in the hay yard squeaked the way it does when every bit of water in it has made up its mind. The stacks threw long shadows. A smell rode the air under the cold, a clean sting that didn't belong to alfalfa. "Salt," Nora said. She swung the lantern low, light painting the cut ends of a bale. Crystals glittered where someone had slit twine and dusted the flake. "You salt hay, and you'll founder a string and put up the rest off feed." Caleb eased the light higher. A burlap sack lay tucked under an eave where the drift couldn't kiss it. Stamped in big letters, "Cutter and Sons, rock salt, 50 all." The top had been knotted and cut, not torn. Careful hands, not desperate ones. Boot tracks ran tight along the lee. The heel wore crooked, a right foot dragging a hair. Caleb knew that track from sale yards and a poker table that had ended loud 2 summers back. "Maddox," he said, and the name tasted like rust. "He got a reason to hate Silas," Nora said. "He's got a reason to hate anyone with a fence he can't push over," Caleb answered. A board creaked where no board should. Nora swung the lantern and caught a face for a blink. The kind of face the cold makes sharp. Eli Maddox turned from the shadow, one hand full of a hayhook, the other where a man keeps bad ideas. "That your salt, Eli?" Caleb asked. "Feed's feed," Maddox said. "Some of us help the winter along." "You help it kill," Nora said. Maddox's eyes cut to her, then past her, to the house lights, the long barn, the yard where a dozen men could show in half a minute if somebody yelled. He set his jaw. "You two don't own the night." "No," Caleb said, "but we work it." Maddox stepped back and went around the end of the stack, where the ground fell off toward the aspen lot. Nora moved to cut him off, fast and sure. "Don't," Caleb started, but her foot hit a snow crust that looked like ground and wasn't. The world dropped under her. The lantern flipped once and went out. The hole breathed up a wet, sour heat that didn't belong in cold country. The old den of something big that had wintered lazy and left a mouth rimmed in sugar snow. "Nora!" Caleb dropped to his belly and slid to the lip. The crust cracked again. She'd gone into the hips and jammed there, one arm pinned by packed snow. "Don't fight," he said, voice flat, like talking a green colt off the rail. "You thrash and you'll drop." He kicked a loop into his rope the size of a kitchen washpan and cuffed it down her one free arm. "Breathe, I've got you." "Don't fall in after me," she said through her teeth. Her breath came up in steam that froze on the edge of the hole like lace. "Not on my list," he said. He took a wrap around a post that held the windbreak and leaned. The crust groaned. The post groaned back. His lips split with the pull and fed the cold a taste of him. "Kick with your heels when I say." "Say it. Now." She kicked easy, not wild. The loop bit the crook of her elbow and squealed on raw rope. She came a hand's breadth, then another. He set his boots and pulled the way a man does when there's no thinking left to do. The edge gave again, and he felt himself start to go, belly over the black. He threw a second rap, and the line sang and held. A hand clamped the back of his coat and yanked him 1 mean inch to safety. Zeb, breathing hard, boots spread, hat gone. "Hell you two doing, courting a hole?" Zeb said. He set his weight on the rope. "Kick again, girl." She did. They brought her up like a netted fish, ugly but alive. Snow sloughed, the smell blew away, and the cold came back like a friend you'd cussed and missed. Nora shivered once, violent and full body, then got to her knees on her own. "He's gone," she said, eyes to the dark. "Not far," Zeb said. He spat ice. "A man with a right foot lazy don't make speed." "Let him run," Caleb said, checking her arm where the rope had burned it red. "He left what we need." He held up the salt sack with the cutter stamp, and to it added a bent hay hook with a nick he recognized, and boot marks that told a story to any law that could be bothered. "Ruth Whitcomb saw someone at the stacks," he added. "From the porch. She'll say it if it comes to saying." Zeb's eyes thinned. "You aim to haul this into Silas's study? I aim to put it on his desk and not raise my voice," Caleb said. "And then I aim to tell him how we keep horses fed without dancing for men like Cutter or Maddox." Nora stood, and the tremble went out of her legs. She touched her burned arm, looked at the smear of blood from Caleb's split lip, and frowned, as if the winter had insulted her personally. "I can walk," she said, before either man could ask, "and I'll be at the barn in 5. You boys can carry your proof." Zeb grunted. "You got more sand than a river," he said. "Bear sleeps shallow this time of year. Mind where you put your feet." "I minded," she said. Ground lied. Caleb picked up the sack and the hook and tucked them under one arm. He wanted to say a thing that would ease the look in her eyes, without making promises a man can't keep under a sky like this. Words came, and he let most of them die. He kept one. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For not letting winter win on my watch," he said. She looked at him, a slow breath. "We all carry turns at the same load," she said. "Yours is due in the big house." He nodded. The piano had gone quiet. The parlor talk had thinned to a murmur. He walked across the yard with the evidence of a small war in his hands and the taste of iron in his mouth. And for once he didn't feel the house as a place for company. He felt it as a place where a man could lay truth on wood and let it be judged. Behind him Nora stepped back into the heat and horse breath, as if she were crossing into country that made sense. Zeb watched the edges and the sky, the old man's eyes catching the things that move when nobody's looking. Eli Maddox was out there in the dark somewhere, working at the edges the way cold works at a gate hinge. But the ranch had marked the ground, red rags on wire, salt sacks labeled bold, a den's black mouth found and argued with. Wind loves to scatter a man's plans. This time some of the pieces had been tied together before it got there. Evening rolled in close and bright. Lamps made small suns along the eaves. The parlor swelled with wool and perfume and a fiddle that knew 3 waltzes and tried them all. Mrs. Holcomb's roast set a fat, good smell in the halls, and the silver turned the fire into coins. Caleb wore a clean shirt that still held a ghost of saddle soap. The army paper rode inside his coat, with the relay note laid over it like a second heart. He shook hands, said names, stood where Silas planted him. Evangeline spoke railroad as if she owned a mile of track in her pocket. Lydia weighed words like figures. Mabel called politics by its first name. Rosalie laughed at everything, but listened at nothing. Ruth Whitcomb stood near the mantel, boots neat, hair simply done, eyes steady. They danced. Caleb did as a host does, moving partners along the room, counting beats, avoiding hems, speaking weather when he couldn't think of anything safer. He kept his hands light and his eyes where they belonged. The papers against his ribs felt like hot stones. Between tunes, Ruth slid beside him, face turned to the fire as if she were only warming her hands. "You have something that tallies," she said, low. "I have something that might," he answered. "And a man in the hay who don't belong," she added, as if remarking on Frost. "I saw a shape where Zeb's lock ought to keep shapes out." "We found what he left," Caleb said. "Name on it." "Cutter's Sack," she said. "Her people sell salt. Won't be the first time a brand embarrassed a kin." She did not smile. "If you need a mouth to say what eyes saw, mine works." "I won't spend you unless I have to," he said. "That's your father in you," Ruth said, "saving what can be saved." She tilted her head, listening to the fiddle reset. "Keep your feet under you, Mr. Hart. Rooms like this throw slicker ice than the yard." Mrs. Holcomb clapped once for the next figure. Country things cleaned up and brought inside, chairs scraped. Evangeline took his arm with practiced grace. "You've a fine house," she said, eyes tracking the crown molding. "Do you entertain often?" "We work often," he said. "When there's breath left over, we eat together." "How rustic," she murmured, and made it a kindness and a slight at once. Love this tale? Hit like, share, and subscribe to keep the West wild. Through the open door he saw the yard the way a man sees his own hand, by feel more than sight. The long barn's windows carried a band of gold. Between tunes he stepped to the porch as a man will step to unfog himself. Air had bite enough to clear ahead without argument. Snow squeaked like mice under the steps. Shoes sounded behind him. Nora, she had a tray in her hands, coffee in cups, steam ghosting into cold. In the porch light her scarf looked darker than the evening. She set the tray on the rail and flexed her fingers once, stiff from hot handles and the day's rope burn. "Mrs. Holcomb said to pass these on the porch first," she said. "She doesn't trust city sleeves near her carpets." "I don't blame her," he said. They stood a small arm's length apart. The big house talked and laughed behind them. The long barn breathed slow and even. Somewhere a horse stamped, iron ringing faint as a bell. "I've got paper," he said, "because there are times a man has to lay one true thing out, even if the wind will take it. Army wants mounts, subject to inspection. Telegraph wants a winter relay. It's not done, but it's more than wishing." "It's good," she said. No clap, no shine, just a nod that set the truth where it could stand. "It might be enough to talk to Silas different." "You'll need more than paper for Silas," she said. "You'll need a clean room to lay it in." Her eyes flicked to the parlor. "Tonight's room isn't that." "I'll make one," he said. She picked up a cup, then set it down without drinking. Steam curled around her knuckles. "Don't do a foolish thing because you're tired of smart ones," she said. He looked at her hand on the cup and the welt the rope had raised there, a red cuff just below the wrist. Words crowded him, all the wrong sizes. He took the smallest. "Your hand? It'll work in the morning," she said. The music climbed. Laughter ran under it. A man coughed the way a cigar makes him. The house was a world. The porch was another. He shifted one step closer, not enough to make heat, enough to make meaning. "Nora." "Don't," she said, automatic. But it wasn't a slap. It was the same old dog by the door, getting up slow to see who was coming in. She looked past him at the yard, at the red scarf she'd rehung for the next blow. "You're set to choose," she said. "You'll choose where the ink points." "I'll choose what keeps us honest," he said. "That's a harder trail," she answered. "It runs on both sides of a heart." The porch light made her eyes darker. "Don't make me a knife you use to cut yourself free." He thought about the bear den's black mouth and the way the rope sang when it held. He thought about a boy warming by a stove and a yearling chewing like winter hadn't tried to bury her. He thought about his father's hand on his shoulder, heavy and right and wrong at once. He took the last step he had in him. He bent kissed her. It wasn't much. A breath, a brush, winter stealing half of it before it landed. But it said a thing he hadn't found the words for. She didn't move for the beat it takes to decide a horse. Then she stepped back into her own space and put her hand flat on the railing to feel wood and cold and the world that stays. "Caleb," she said, and his name in her mouth made the night smaller. "Don't bring me into that room unless you're set to carry it all the way out." "I am," he said. He wasn't sure if it was courage or need that answered, but it stood upright. The door opened behind them. Mrs. Holcomb filled it like weather. She took in the cups, the steam, the two of them with a glance made from a lifetime of seeing more than she said. Her chin dipped a hair. "Mr. Art," she said, "guests are asking for you. Miss Pike, coffee in the blue room, then the parlor." "Yes, ma'am," Nora said. Mrs. Holcomb's eyes softened almost to warmth as they touched the welt on Nora's wrist, the split in Caleb's lip. "Best you both wash your faces with cold water," she said, which was as near to blessing as she gave. Inside, the fiddle found its stride. Silas stood near the study door, a shape cut out of dark. He watched Caleb cross the parlor, and the weight of the papers in Caleb's coat felt right for once, like a tool picked up for its job. The room smiled. The piano talked. The ranch held its breath the way it does when snow loads a roof beam and you can't yet say if it'll hold. Tonight the beam would be tested. Tomorrow somebody would fix what cracked or haul out the pieces and build again. Night set hard and clear. Stars cut the cold fine. In the long barn, Toby's cough went from gravel to wet. Mrs. Holcomb bent over him with mustard and steam and the kind of worry that makes hands brisk. Nora listened once, then twice. On the third, she lifted her head like a horse that hears something far off. "He needs Doc Winters," she said, "tonight." "Roads shine till noon," Zeb said. "Mercury's sunk. You'll rattle him to pieces." "River's set," Nora answered. "Shortest way if the ice holds." "The ice talks mean when it's this clean," Zeb said. "Good," Nora said. "Then we'll hear it before it takes us." Caleb had the team to the sled in 4 minutes, because fear makes a man fast without waste. He wrapped Toby in wool, then buffalo, then an old horse blanket that smelled of sweat and good work. The boy's fever painted his cheeks high and foolish. Nora rigged the load low, cinched quick with square knots you could untie with numb hands. She tied a man-length of rope from her belt to the sled ring. "You're not riding?" Caleb asked. "I go first," she said, lifting the axe. "If I go through, you turn the team before the rope comes tight." "Like hell," he said. "Like you must," she said, and looked at him until the wind itself stood still to listen. "He's small, I am not." Silas stepped from the dark without noise, coat buttoned, hat down, eyes taking in everything that mattered, and none of what didn't. "You plan to cross at the Cottonwood Bend," he said. Not a question, a map spoken out loud. "Yes, sir," Nora said. "Shallows lay there, current slow, ice speaks truer." Silas's gaze went to the rope at her waist, followed it to the sled. His jaw worked once. "You test with the axe. Keep to snow, not clear. Black ice is liar's ice." His voice had the tone he used with men he trusted and horses he liked. "Zeb, carry a spare rope and a pole. Caleb, keep your team on snow, not glare. If she raises her hand, you back like you feel hell at your hocks." "Yes, sir," they said, all three, because the river makes children of men and tells them what to do. They slid down to the cottonwoods where the water curved and slowed its thinking. Moon laid silver in every scrape. The river wore a skin the color of smoked glass. Snow drifted in scallops along the near bank, swept clean in the middle where the wind had licked it. Nora walked out with the axe like a pilgrim. 2 steps, test, listen. The axe head tapped and told its story. Good here, solid thump. Thin there, a hollow drum. She swung the flat of the blade to clear snow, then laid fir branches where color turned wrong. The rope at her waist trailed back to the sled, narrow as a vein. Toby coughed. The sound slid under the ice and came back changed. "Hush, kid," Zeb said, voice soft as felt. "Let the lady hear." Nora set her feet and tapped and listened and moved. The ice groaned once, deep like a barn beam shrugging under a load. She froze, palm up. Team stopped. Caleb took a breath and put it back down slow. "There's a seam," Nora said. "New freeze atop old." She knelt, laid the axe flat, and eased a branch across. "We go belly to belly here. Sled low, me lower." She kept on until she found her line, white to gray, drift to scoured, each small thing measured and marked. It is a strange courage, the kind that moves in inches. Halfway she glanced back. Silas stood at the bank's lip, pole in hand, the way he'd stood at a calving shed door, not interfering, not leaving. "Come," she called. "Slow, let the runners whisper." Caleb eased the team. The runners sang a high, thin note. Toby's breath ghosted out the buffalo folds. Zeb paced the offside with a fencer's balance, spare rope looped over his arm like a lariat meant for water. At the seam the ice spoke again, a warble this time, the voice of something thinking about failure. Nora went flat to spread her weight, elbows and knees, chin tipped to keep her ear to the world. She felt the cold take her coat and bite the bone and did not hurry. She set the axe beyond the seam, reached, pulled, slid, reached again. The rope at her waist sagged, paying out slow. A hairline opened by her left hand, black and clean as a paper cut. She shifted, small, sure, with the knowledge of a person who has fallen once and learned which way the earth tilts, and the line closed like a mouth deciding to forgive. On the far side she rose to a knee and brought her palm up twice. Caleb breathed again. The team took another step that wasn't quite a step. The sled trimmed the seam like a skater. Wood ticked, rope hummed. The ice held its breath. Then the off-runner found a soft place. The sled sagged, not down, but low enough to put everybody's heart in their teeth. Caleb laid voice on the team, not loud, not scared, just a note the horses knew from bad footing on spring mud. "Easy, easy. Stay under yourselves." They did. Good horses do, when you ask them right. Nora came back 3 paces on hands and knees, put the axe flat to make a bridge for the runner, and patted the wood like a dog. There you go," she told the sled, like it could listen. Maybe it could. Wood knows hands. The sled found the axe and slid over, ribs and steel and axe head talking like a file on a nail. Past that point the ice thickened. She stood, knees popping, and walked the last yards as if on floorboards she'd planed herself. The team lurched onto snow that didn't argue. Zeb's breath came out in a cuss, and a prayer stacked together. Caleb swallowed a noise he didn't know he'd made. The rope went slack against Nora's hip. She turned and lifted a hand, not the stop this time, but something else. She pointed into her own chest like a woman settling accounts. "My weight first," she said. Silas came out onto the ice then, not far, not heroic, just 3 careful steps to where the river's voice told him to stop. He planted the pole and looked at her on the far bank. In the moonlight, his face was all bone and will. He drew in a breath that fogged and shredded. "Good hand," he said across the cold. The river carried it clean. She tipped her chin. It was the only answer that fit. They made the doctors in 20 minutes that felt longer. Winters had the lamp lit and the stove roaring like a train. He listened to Toby's chest with his ear and his heavy hands, poured cod oil and cough, set the boy to bed under quilts a church lady had pieced with more hope than color sense. "He'll live," Winters said. "Keep his feet dry and his mouth shut, and tell him not to fight the cough out of pride." On the way back, the river was the same river, and not at all. The line was marked now, fir branches like a breadcrumb trail for men who don't trust luck. Nora led again. The ice complained less, as if it had learned them. At the bank, Silas took the pole from Caleb and set it back where he'd found it, neat. A small ceremony only he understood. He looked at Nora the way a man looks at a horse that has carried him home once when it wasn't owed. "My wife could hear ice," he said, voice low, half to the trees. "She taught me not to be a fool on Monday. I forgot some. You reminded me." He glanced at Caleb, then away. A ranch needs that kind of memory. Nora's breath smoked in steady pulses. "Ice tells the truth, if you let it," she said. "Men do when they have to." Silas's mouth worked again around words that didn't come easy. "I'll not have fools under my roof," he said, which for his kind of man was almost praise. "Tomorrow, noon," he looked at Caleb full. "Bring your papers, bring your proof. We'll clear a room and get this settled." He turned and went up the bank like a man who had decided the next fence to set. Caleb watched him, the shape of him against night, snow, and stars. Something in the angle of his shoulders had changed, a fraction less iron, a fraction more weight carried even. He looked at Nora. She was rubbing feeling back into the welt where the rope had bit the night before. Moon put a pale edge on her cheek and left the rest up to a man's remembering. He wanted to say 100 things wrong and one thing right. He chose the right one, small and square. "Thank you," he said. "Don't spend it all at once," she answered, and there might have been a smile in it if the cold hadn't frozen such things down tight. The team blew steam like engines. The sled rang like a church step when they lifted the runners to the packed yard. In the big house, Mrs. Holcomb's lamps burned late. Somewhere a fiddle case snapped shut. The night settled the way a quilt does when you lay it honest. Love this tale? Hit like, share, and subscribe to keep the West wild. Morning would bring a room cleared of rugs and music, a desk, papers, a salt sack with a name on it, a red scarf on a corner post, a father with the river still in his ears, and a choice that had quit being a week on a clock and turned into something a heartman could carry into weather. Noon came sharp as a knife. Mrs. Holcomb had the rugs rolled and the parlor shut. The study stood bare, desk cleared, ledgers stacked, stove ticking like a clock you could see. Wet crescents of snow bled off boots and made dark moons on the floor. Silas set his hands on the oak like a judge laying claim to the bench. The families filed in with their winter smiles, thin and polite. Fathers brought bank faces. Daughters wore wool and calm. Ruth Whitcomb stood a half step back, hat in her hands, eyes taking the room's measure. Zeb leaned the jam, quiet as a fence post. Nora wasn't there. "Speak," Silas said. Caleb laid 2 papers on the desk. Army remount intent to purchase 60 head a batch, 4 batches in 2 years. Subject to inspection. Post and telegraph, winter relay lease, coal and rent paid month to month. Teams stabled here at our feed. He kept his voice even. Figures enough to winter us twice and set 2 new mills on the north pasture without a mortgage. Silas read without moving his mouth, which was how you knew. He trusted the ink. He set them side by side and looked up. "Proof holds better than promises." "I brought more," Caleb said. He set a burlap sack on the desk, the cutter stamp turning the room's air colder. Beside it he laid a bent hay-hook with a nick in the crook and a lath with a boot print rubbed in soot. The right heel worn lazy. Rosalie Cutter's color rose and fell. Her father stiffened. "Our name sells salt, Mr. Hart. It does not sprinkle it in a rival's hay." "I'm not calling your hand to the table, Mr. Cutter," Caleb said. "I'm calling Eli Maddox's. He used your sack and a right boot I can pick out of a crowd. Somebody meant our stock to sour." Silas turned the hook, found the nick with his thumb, as if it might tell him the rest. "Witness," he said. Ruth stepped forward. "From the porch last night," she said, "I saw a man in the stacks where a lock should keep men out. Height near yours, Mr. Hart. Coat cut like a drover's, right foot dragged a hair. I'll say it in town if I have to." Cutter started to protest. Silas cut him off with a look that moved men same as a shove. "This room isn't about town," he said. He tapped the Army memo once. "This says horses feed the bank. The relay says wire pays coal. Both say we stand without an alliance if we have to." He turned his head. "Fetch Miss Pike," he told Zeb. The room went tight. Evangeline's mouth thinned. Lydia's eyes counted exits. Mabel set her jaw like stone. Rosalie examined the chandelier as if it were to blame for everything. Nora came in with the plainness of barn light. Hands clean, hair neat, dress brown as new leather. She stood just inside the door and kept her hat by her side like a shield she wasn't going to use. Silas didn't soften. He didn't harden further either. "Last night," he said, "you put a boy and a team across ice and brought them back. You read the river and you taught men who thought they already knew it." "Yes, sir," Nora said. "We brought him back." Silas looked to the scarf on the corner of the bookcase, red wool tied there by Mrs. Holcomb like a church ribbon. He looked to the salt sack. He looked to his son. "Say your piece," he told Caleb. Caleb felt the stove's heat and the cold under the door meet in the middle of him. He set his hands flat so they wouldn't show a shake. "I won't sell a marriage to buy a winter," he said. "I've brought other ways. They're not finished, but they're sound." He took breath and spent it. "I choose Nora Pike." The room made its noises, soft gasps, a father's cough, meant for scorn, a glove creak on wood. Ruth's chin dipped once, that was all. Rosalie's eyes flashed quick and mean, then settled flat. Lydia stared at the papers like they'd betrayed her personally. Mabel's mouth found a line that would hold for years. Silas didn't blink. He set a palm on each paper, as if to feel the truth under them. "You understand what you're dropping," he said. "I do," Caleb said. "And what you're picking up?" "Yes, sir." Silas looked at Nora. "You understand what my name weighs," he said. "It's not lace and tea." "I know what work weighs," Nora said. "Names sit just fine if the work under 'em doesn't wobble." Cutter found his voice again. "This is an insult to every family here, dragging him into a parlor proceeding." Ruth's head turned. "She dragged a sick child over a river at midnight," she said, not loud, not soft. "Seems she knows how to enter a room." Silas lifted a hand and quiet returned, because that's what his hand did. He fixed his eyes on the salt sack one last time, then pushed it aside. He tapped the red scarf and left it where it lay. "A ranch needs a hand who saves folks before saving face," he said. "This house won't run on dances and talk. It runs on men who show up and women who don't scare easy." He let the words set. "I won't bless foolishness, but this—" He laid his fingers on the Army memo and the relay lease. "Isn't that? This is counting." He looked at Caleb. "You'll marry quiet. No fuss, no column inches. Miss Pike will learn what my wife knew. Books, stores, accounts. She'll keep the barn if she wants, and the house if she can. We'll take the Army's money when the horses pass muster. We'll house the wire and make coal piles that shame the wind. Those who don't like it can find warmer rooms in town." He turned to the guests. "You came for alliances. You found a ranch standing on its own. Legs. Eat dinner if you're hungry. Leave if you're not. Either way, we won't owe you apology." Mabel Thorne drew herself up like a flag and folded, mean and neat. "Washington has a long memory, Mr. Hart." "So does weather," Silas said. Lydia Penfield looked at Caleb, then at Nora, then at the figures in her head. "Your memorandum, subject to inspection," she murmured, more to herself than anyone, and nodded once as if a ledger had balanced in some private column. Evangeline offered a smile that showed no teeth and no heat. Rosalie didn't look again at the sack with her name on it. Ruth set her hat back on and offered Nora a hand. "Miss Pike," she said, "if you ever need a woman to write a line with you, you know where my fence starts." "I do," Nora said, taking the hand. It was a good grip. The room emptied the way a storm goes, sudden, then slowly, leaving a pressure drop your ears have to learn. Chairs scraped, silk whispered, the front door shut on cold and carriage bells. Silas stood a long breath without speaking. Then he signed the relay lease where Pritchard had left a blank for a landowner's hand. He didn't make a ceremony of it. He never did. He sent the pen down. "Mrs. Holcomb will find you a ring," he said to Caleb, voice gone rough. "Your mother's if I can put hands to it. Church tomorrow if the preacher can stand the cold. If not, Winters can speak words that hold." He looked at Nora, and something in his face eased the width of a fingernail. "You saved what was mine last night," he said. "That makes you part of it whether I asked for you or not. Don't make me sorry." "I won't," she said. He nodded once, like a man putting a post in line. "Zeb," he said, "see that the army paper is copied and locked, and get that salt off my desk." Zeb scooped the sack with 2 fingers like it was a dead thing and grinned under his beard, where no one could see. "Yes, sir." Caleb let out the breath he'd been holding since the clock started a week ago. The stove ticked. Snow hissed off Silas's coat and found the floor and vanished. Outside, the yard stood up under the cold, same as before, and not the same at all. Nora touched the red scarf where it hung on the bookcase and left it there. "For the next blow," she said. "For the next blow," Caleb answered. The house moved again, small sounds of work picking up after a storm. Somewhere in the kitchen a pan rang, somewhere in the barn a horse stamped. The study door stood open to the hall's light. The thing was decided. Tomorrow would be for vows and feed, and the same old weather with new names on it. Snow fell the way good words land, quiet and meant. Morning broke pale as milk over Northern Star. Mrs. Holcomb had scrubbed the little chapel in town until the wood smelled of soap and pine. A stove banged and learned its duty. Benches took the weight of neighbors who'd braved a clean cold to see what winter's choosing looked like. Caleb stood near the front, coat brushed, hair tamed. The split in his lip had gone to a thin red thread. In his pocket lay 2 folded papers, not for show, only because a man keeps what saved him close. Beside the pulpit, Judge Winters warmed his hands and his voice. "Preacher took ill," he said with a smile that showed he'd seen worse than weather, "but I got words that'll hold." Zeb's grin worked up through his beard when he saw the crowd. Ranch hands shoulder to shoulder with church ladies. Ruth Whitcomb in sage wool with snow brightening her hair. Doc Winters's wife with a basket of something hot. Even the telegraph man Pritchard sat in the back like a cat near a stove, surprised to find himself among vows. Silas came last, heavy coat buttoned, hat in hand. He didn't look at anyone first. He walked to the front row and set a small velvet box on the rail like a tithe. "Your mother's," he told Caleb low. "Don't drop it. Don't waste it." His mouth flattened at the corners. "You get one chance to make a thing simple. Keep it that way." The door opened again, and Winter looked in. Nora stepped through with the weather on her shoulders, and something calm in her eyes. Dress plain and clean, hair smoothed back, a ribbon where a scarf usually lived. She moved like a hand crossing a barn, sure of what mattered, not asking permission from boards she'd walked 1,000 times. Ruth went to her and touched her elbow in the manner of women who mean help and not show. "You look right," Ruth said. "That's rarer than pretty." Nora took her place. Hands met hands. Cold left their fingers and pooled on the floor. Judge Winters raised his book, but he looked at their faces, not the print. "We gather to say what work two people will do together," he said. "That's all a marriage is out here, work, and mercy when the work runs thin." Caleb turned the ring over with his thumb once. 3 small stones in a plain band, the kind of gold that lasts, because nobody asks it to be anything fancier than itself. He cleared his throat. When he spoke, the words came as steady as pulling a sled on good ice. "I promise you sun up and sun down," he said. "Feed before coffee, truth before pride. I'll keep my hands honest and my name off foolishness. When weather sits on us, I'll make lanes. When joy comes, I'll set a place for it." Nora's voice carried without strain. "I promise to keep horses and books and my temper when I can," she said. "To say what's true when it helps and hold my tongue when it saves. I'll stand beside you at gate and table. If the river lies, I'll hear it. If the wind forgets our names, I won't." Judge Winters nodded like a man hearing a teen pull in time. "By the power the territory lends me, and by the hard sense you brought yourselves, I pronounce you married." Caleb slid the ring home. Metal met skin. It felt like a tool that fit the hand. He kissed her the way you handle a good colt. No show, all trust. The room breathed and smiled. Mrs. Holcomb wiped an eye with a quick, angry practicality, like tears were a mess someone ought to take credit for. Silas stood. For a second the lines stayed iron. Then something in them eased the width of a pencil shaving. He looked at Nora, not past her. "Welcome," he said. Just the word. It was more than enough. Zeb cleared his throat, tugged at his vest, the way a man does when a speech sneaks up on him. "I ain't ordained," he said, "but I know a benediction when it needs saying." He spread his hands like he was showing a fresh-turned furrow. "This house don't promise riches, only work, and someone to work beside you. When the drifts stack, stack your feed. When tempers rise, lower your voice. Ride the fence together, count the calves together, and if you must be fools, be the same kind of fool on the same day." Laughter went through the room like stove heat, the kind that thaws without taking your strength. Outside, the snow ticked against the windows, steady as a clock. After, there was coffee and biscuits split and buttered on a knife that knew how to do it fast. Men stamped and swore at the cold with manners. Women slipped casseroles into Mrs. Holcomb's hands and pretended they didn't come from empty larders. Ruth hugged Nora hard and quick. "Fence starts at the cottonwoods," she said. "If you need me." "Likely I will," Nora said. Pritchard sidled up to Caleb. "We'll run that wire through the barn wall by week's end," he said, as if this were any Saturday. "Winter's long, better to be ready." Captain Harlan hadn't come. The army draws its own circle, but his memorandum sat in Caleb's pocket like a small, fair weight. When the door swung open and cold came in, Caleb could smell the barn on the air, hay, leather, a hint of liniment. It was as much a blessing as anything spoken. They rode home on the sled because why wouldn't you, with horses fresh and a sky like a clean sheet. The chapel bell gave them 3 notes that hung over the yard. The long barn threw its band of gold again. Men lifted hands from chores without stopping them. That's respect on a working place. At the porch, Silas fished in his coat and brought out a little ledger, the one Catherine Hart had kept. The corners were rounded from years of use. He put it in Nora's hands. "This ran my house," he said. "Don't let it run you. You run it." She took the book like a newborn foal, gentle, steady, not afraid. "Yes, sir." He nodded once and looked out where the world went on in its old way. "Feed at 4, wire crew by Friday. Zeb, shift the thin cows to the south pen. Caleb, pick 20 head that won't embarrass me when a uniform throws a leg over." "Yes, sir," they said together without meaning to, and everybody heard the music in it. Dusk came down easy. Horses blew steam into blue air. The red scarf hung on the yard corner post, ready for whatever blow came next. Caleb and Nora stood on the porch, a breath before the work took them back. Two figures under a small roof, the land shouldered close around. "You happy?" he asked. "I'm steady," she said. "Happiness will catch up when it has chores done." He smiled, small and true. "Then we won't wait on it. We'll give it something to find." They stepped off the porch and into the kind of life you can build in any weather: feed to move, wire to hang, names to answer to. Snow kept falling, the ranch kept breathing. And under the quiet a promise held, plain as a fence line in new white, that whatever came, they'd take it side by side and make it earn its keep. Snow keeps falling, work keeps calling. Caleb and Nora don't promise riches, only feed before coffee, truth before pride, and two sets of hands on the same rope when the river talks mean. If this story settled warm in your chest, drop a 0 in the comments. If Zeb's benediction was your moment, drop a 1. If the red scarf in the whiteout stays with you, drop a 2. Hit subscribe to ride along for the next Old West tale. Quiet hearts, hard weather, and the kind of courage that mends as it fights.